Hi there, my name is Jeff Olson.
I'm Charlie McLaren.
And I'm Devin Caratu, and today we're interviewing my grandpa Rodger.
Rodger Kuczynski.
We're in Brookfield, Wisconsin, and it is approximately 5 o'clock p.m.
So what is your name and where were you born?
My name is Rodger Walter Kuczynski. I was born January 4th, 1945 in Milwaukee at the Milwaukee General Hospital on Wisconsin Avenue.
Okay. What was the language that was spoken in your household?
English 99% of the time. Sometimes my dad, his first language was Polish, so sometimes he'd speak in Polish.
And what were your parents' names?
My dad's baptismal name was Konstantin Augustus Kuczynski, but that evolved into Gus, or Gustav. And my mom's name was Julia Polak. And she was always Mom. That was her name.
Outside of your parents, did anyone else live in your childhood home?
Yes, I had an older brother, Jim. He was born on February 19th, 1942. And just one older brother. That's the only sibling I had.
How was your relationship with your brother Jim?
Brothers. It was a good relationship, but we each had our own friends and groups that we hung around with, and because there was a 3-year difference in age, we'd do personal things together. But as far as hanging out or socializing, we did it with our own groups.
Were you able to learn anything from him? Like just...
Oh, he was, he's ended up being he got a mechanical engineering degree, and he was always a very good mechanic. He raced cars, things like that. And engineering was his deal. So I remember him one time building a kite, a simple thing, but he built such a big kite and that thing took off. It was just in the air thousands of feet. We kind of lost track of it. Yeah, but he was, at an early age he got into internal combustion engines, so he had a little plane that he'd fly around, so he'd take me on those ventures, but we didn't, other than that, we didn't do a lot together.
Were there any aunts, uncles, or cousins that you were really close with growing up?
No, not really. I did have a cousin who lived upstairs, but we were never really close because he was 25 years older. My mother had a large family, so some of my cousins were a lot older. My mother being one of the younger ones in the family, and some of the her older siblings had children who were as old enough to be my uncle. In fact, my cousin Arnold, I always called Uncle Arnie, but he was really my cousin, but he was so much older. Yeah, he lived upstairs when he came back from World War II and started his family up there. He actually went to Marquette on the GI Bill and became an engineer at the time it was called Rex Chain Build, but now it's Rex Chain Build got together with Nordberg and all the Rex Nord. But anyways, he was an engineer there, and he was a hero of mine. He was a pilot at a P-51 aircraft. a P-51 Mustang. He was a fighter pilot in World War II. But none of the cousins were really that close. I guess the one that was closest to me was my cousin Norman out on the farm, the family farm, where my mother did a lot of growing up. And Norm was about a year younger than me, but far better inclined to farming and mechanical and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess he would be the closest cousin, you know, that because we were age-wise and we hung around together on the farm.
Yeah. More about the farm. Was that, what ages were you like going to the farm?
My first memories of the farm was I was maybe 4 years old. But I mean, the farm was in the family since 1921, 1922, something like that, right outside of Lake Geneva. And the memories of the farm I had were many, but the earliest memory was the horses. My grandfather farmed with horses. Yeah, he didn't have a tractor or anything like that. He was a tough dude.
You seem to talk a lot, or you mentioned your mother. Did she have an occupation, or what did she do around the house?
She was, I don't know what she did exactly before I was born, but then once I was born, she was a stay-at-home mom until I was like, I think 7 years old or so, and then she worked a job at Allis Chalmers, clerical work. She was underemployed. She was a smart woman, but underemployed. Well, because she was a woman, she was underemployed. But she didn't have any particular skills. You know, I mean, she wasn't an engineer or a nurse or a doctor or anything like that.
And then, where did your father work?
Well, he worked at Allis Chalmers. Yeah, he worked there since he started there in 1935 and worked there a little over 41 years. And he ended up being, what they call him, the A-team, one of the top machinists at Allis Chalmers. So if they wanted something done and done right, he was one of the machinists that they would rely on. You have pictures of that too. There's a couple pictures of him doing machine work. Didn't pay attention to very interesting stuff. Those things were real Milwaukee things.
If you don't mind me asking, do you remember like how much you got paid for that job?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, going through the albums for this interview, came out with what they call a transfer slip, and they moved them from one machine to another, and they just said you're going to go to work on a turret lathe, and then they said you're going to be, his guaranteed rate was $1.67 an hour. That's 1950. But he could make a bonus of like up to I think 7 or 9 cents an hour.
And would your dad, Gus, would he walk to work, or did he take?
Oh yes,
Okay.
yeah. We lived 4 blocks from Allis Chalmers, 4 short blocks. We lived on 74th and Madison, and 70th is where Allis Chalmers was. So he'd walk 4 short blocks, and he'd be right there. So yeah, he never drove to work, didn't miss work. Very punctual. Very much habituated to the industrial way of life. Things were set down, They were all timed, you know, and that was it. I remember he would get out of work and he'd come home and you could hear the back door open and then you could hear the work boots drop and then the back door would open and you looked at the clock, it was 4:32. Not 4:30, not 4:35, 4:32. That's how punctual his industrial life was.
And you said like the work he did at Alice Chalmers was pretty like important. You said he was like on the A team. Did he have like anything to do with the Manhattan Project? Do you know, or anything like any major projects?
I doubt if he had anything to do with the Manhattan Project, although I am familiar with what Alice Chalmers did in the Manhattan Project, because they were electrical engineering, they were the top engineering staff, so they made the magnets that would, the system that would concentrate, I don't want to say atoms, but to concentrate the material so you could get enough, what do they call when you get a critical mass? So, I mean, when you want to generate a higher grade of uranium, you have to coalesce it, okay? And they made those, the magnets for that.
Mm-hmm.
But they also made the first turbine, the generator, to go into the Hoover Dam, that was made in Alice Chalmers. So they made a lot of stuff, electrical stuff and pumps. And yeah, the biggest generator that Con Ed had, and it's New York City, it came from Alice Chalmers at the time. I don't know what they have now. You have pictures of that.
So now, getting back to your childhood here, what neighborhood did you grow up in?
West Allis, pinned between Alice Chalmers 4 blocks to the east and the Wisconsin State Fair Park 3 blocks to the west. So it was that way, and then a couple blocks to the north was the railroad tracks, and that was Milwaukee. And everything was right there. The school, the church, the city hall, the city library, the post office, the grocery stores, the movie theaters, they were all within easy walking distance. So we didn't have a car until I got a little bit older. We didn't need one. Dad walked to work, everything you needed was right there, so. Very, very stable neighborhood. I mean, the grade school I went to, Holy Assumption, and that was 8 years there. And I went through, good friends that I went all the way through grade school and high school with. I mean, it was a very stable neighborhood, relationships.
So you thought, did you like your neighborhood's community?
Oh yes, oh yeah. It was not as diversified as you'd find today. It's mostly Eastern European. So there'd be Polish, Germans, Latvians. Can't think of the people, the Lithuanians, and Italian here and there.
So with that like ethnic culture in your neighborhood? Would you have any like celebrations like that, or would you celebrate that kind of heritage?
No, not in our neighborhood. I don't remember, a Polish parade or a German parade or anything like that, or get-togethers. No, the communities would, the central communities in Milwaukee would do that. I mean, they have Italian Fest. They've had that forever. The Italians would get together, the Germans would get together, the Poles would get together on the south side. But the communities were more homogeneous.
Like of the same, yeah, like of the same stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
If you go down to the south side, 8 out of 10 people you're going to meet are going to be Polish. If you went around Marquette, the hilltop, I mean, there'd be a lot of Irish, and the Italians in the Third Ward. You know, that all came about apparently because when people were migrating from the old country and they couldn't speak the language, they'd go into the community where they could survive bilingually. So you come over from Italy, you don't speak English, you go to the Italian neighborhood and people there would translate for you and you'd learn the ropes through your community. Same with the Poles, the Germans, everybody else. It had nothing to do with anything other than this is how you do it, how you learn.
What would you and the other neighborhood kids do to pass time or in your free time?
Oh, yeah. And baseball, football, basketball, hockey. That's what the guys would do. The girls, I don't know, we didn't play with the girls. We'd tease them. They'd be around too, but one girl would play with us. Marion was a very good baseball player. And if we'd play scrubs, you know what scrubs are? Pick sides. I mean, let's say 10 guys or 11 guys turn up at the playground to play baseball. You don't have enough for 2 teams, so then you play scrubs. Everybody takes a position and then you bat until you make out and then you rotate. And if we did play teams and Marion was there, she wasn't the last person picked. She could play ball. But that was the only gal I remember that, would be athletic enough to play with the guys. We, being where we lived, water wasn't available. When I mean water, I mean the rivers or lake or anything like that. So there wasn't a lot of water sports, When I got a little bit older, you could take the Greenfield bus out to Greenfield Park and go swimming out there. But otherwise, the water sports weren't there. I will say that West Allis was very accommodating to the youth community. There was always stuff available. For instance, we were playing hockey down at McKinley. It's on 72nd and Washington. And we'd play hockey, and there was other kids wanting just to skate, So instead of telling us we couldn't play hockey there, what they did was they flooded another rink so we had a place to go play hockey and not disturb the people who just wanted to skate and play around. So they were very, very accommodating for the kids. Kind of kept us all out of trouble.
Did you ever?
Busy.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, you can finish that.
No, go ahead.
Did you ever get into trouble, like as a kid?
Did I ever? No, not really. The the worst thing we ever did was in the summertime we'd go raiding. So you'd case the neighborhood and see who's got the best apples or the best tomatoes, and you might go sneak and steal a tomato, which, you know, I guess you could talk to St. Augustine about that, but no, that's about the worst we ever did. We never had any occasion, you know, the cops come around and, you know, put a lid on us. That didn't happen. We were good kids. You know, a couple bloody noses, but I mean, it's little kids, you know.
You mentioned that you would play baseball a lot in the neighborhood. Would you ever go to baseball games like Braves or?
Yes, and in fact, we lived close enough where we could actually, you know, and you got young legs, we could walk to the stadium from where we lived. And yeah, my dad would take us. We'd sit in the bleachers, or we'd go what they call knothole games. And this was you go down to the playground, and for like 50 cents, or maybe have been a little cheaper, you get a bus ride down to the park, a ticket, and maybe a soda or something. So we got to see that. I remember distinctly, you know, sitting in the right field bleachers, and there's Henry Aaron, you know. So it was very cool.
Do you remember any of your favorite players when you were young?
Johnny Logan was one of my favorite players. And don't ask me why I like Warren Spahn, and of course Henry, and Lou Burdett was one of the favorites. All the kids all liked Lou because he liked the kids. He would tease them and talk to them. I remember when they would warm up before the game, they'd be out this is before they had walls and stuff like that. They had a fence, and the fence is maybe only 6 feet tall, and it was a regular wire fence. And the guys would go out there to warm up, and you could yell at them, you know, say, "Hey, how you doing, Lou?" and all this, and he would tease the kids. He'd throw baseballs to the kids, and then after a while, he'd make believe he got the kids running. He'd make believe he's throwing it one way, and he'd get the kids to run, and then he'd throw it another way, and he'd get the kids running back and forth, and he'd laugh so hard. He had my dad laughing so hard too, but I mean, it was a lot of fun, and it was warm. I mean, the relationship between the players and the kids, they really worked on that. They weren't aloof at all, you know. I mean, they were right there.
Mm-hmm. So that was at County Stadium, right?
Yes.
So you talked a little bit about like warm. Like during the summer, I imagine it'd be pretty hot in Milwaukee. Did you ever go to like the pool or anything with your friends, or to the lake?
No, because I didn't, and I can't remember the first time. I must have been a teenager by the time I first went down to Lake Michigan. I mean, really, you know, to the lake itself. And yeah, there wasn't anything like air conditioning. There was no residential air conditioning. You might go to a movie theater, might be air conditioned, but nobody in the neighborhood had air conditioning. So when it got hot out, things changed. You acted differently. You opened the window, and you didn't roll around a lot when you went to sleep. Otherwise, you wouldn't go to sleep.
Sorry. I want to ask a few more questions about the Braves. because of the close relationship, did that make the Braves World Series more meaningful to you and any other kids around the?
Oh yeah, I had a hard time believing at that point in time. I was 12 years old when they won the World Championship, and at that point in time, baseball was my game, and I just couldn't believe it that the world champs were right down the block. So yeah, it was big. In fact, when they were playing in the World Series and we were in school, they would turn the radio on and we'd listen to the game in school. It was that important to the community, actually.
When the Braves left, how did you feel about?
Yeah. In fact, I was there for the last game in Milwaukee. It was in '66, and I forget. I think they were playing the Cardinals. Well, I'm not sure. And it came like the seventh inning, and Henry Aaron comes up, so there's a standing ovation. Eddie Matthews, standing ovation. And then it went into extra innings. So then there was another standing ovation, and then another standing ovation. They ended up losing the Braves, but Milwaukee was the big loser on that. You know, I could go on and on and on about Milwaukee and Atlanta. There used to be the Milwaukee Hawks. Now I think they're the Atlanta Hawks. They used to be the Milwaukee Braves. Now they're the Atlanta Braves. So yeah, they stole a lot from us. And there's a reason why that all came about, but we don't want to get into that. I could do that off camera.
You mentioned you went to a Catholic grade school, right?
Yes.
Sorry, you go.
Okay, School Sisters of Notre Dame, and the regular, I forget the order of priests they were. I don't know if there's a seminary in Milwaukee, and that's where they all came from. And I don't know what order they are even.
Wait, what was the name of the grade school you went to again?
Holy Assumption. It was dedicated to the Holy Virgin Mary.
Was religion important
Oh yes.
to your family?
Oh yes, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, I was an altar boy for a couple of years, and they were real happy about that. The parents really liked that. My dad was pretty religious, and my Busha, my grandma, my dad's mother, she said that she would pay for me to go to St. Francis de Sales, the seminary, you know. And I had to tell her, oh, that's not me. I'm not priestly material, even though I come from a family that had religion. I wasn't priestly, so that wouldn't have worked out.
Did you say you went to like mass like most Sundays?
Most Sundays?
Or like every Sunday or
Oh, yeah.
every Sunday?
Oh, gosh, we went to church Monday through Friday and then on Sunday. So we hit Mass at least 6 times a week. And then sometimes we go on Saturdays so you can make the 5 Holy Saturdays. You know, you make your 9 first Fridays, then you make your 5 first Saturdays, and you're guaranteed to have a priest at your side when you die. I don't know if that's gonna do you any good.
Do you have any funny stories of being an altar boy, serving in mass?
A couple maybe. We used to have they call it a platen, and if you're receiving communion, you'd have to hold it underneath the person's chin. So if it was your buddy that was up there, you'd always give him a little extra punch. Not to brag, and this is definitely not a brag, but back then, you couldn't even have a drink of water before you received communion. In fact, First Communion, they shut the water off in the school so the kids wouldn't make a mistake and have a sip of water on their first, because then they couldn't receive. So consequently, if I would serve an early Mass, I fainted a couple of times. You go there and you go, oh, everything started going around, and pretty soon you wake up. One time the pastor says, "Get him out of here." They were doing the incense, and that, the odor coming off the incense, and I'm right there, and I go, oh. Started going around, and he says, "You get out of here." So I had to leave. And at one time, I don't know, I guess the statute of limitations is gone by now, but one of the guys that I served with, we had hours of adoration. They'd have a 24-hour adoration, so somebody had to be there in front of the Virgin Mary constantly. So the altar boys would take turns, and me and Glenn was going to the seminary. And so after we did our tour, we went back, and he pulls out a bottle of wine, and I says, "Glenn, you can't do that." He said, "Hey, I'm going to the seminary, ain't I?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, okay then." So, and then he started chugging a little wine. But it's kind of denatured wine. It's not like you're going to get drunk on it. It's just called wine. So that was probably the worst thing.
You mentioned your Busha, or your grandmother. Do you
Yeah.
have any fond memories of her?
A very, very warm, sweet person. But we were never that close. Like I say, we didn't have a car, so they lived on 65th and Mitchell, and we were on 74th and Madison, so we were just on a Sunday, that would be it. We'd take a walk over there and spend some time with Grandma and Grandpa. But no, it was a warm relationship, but not deep,
So after you finished school at Holy Assumption, where did you go to high school?
Pius.
How many kids were roughly?
At Pius?
Yeah.
I believe our freshman class was like 750 in a freshman class, but by the time you got to sophomore year, you lost maybe 150, maybe 200 you'd lose. The public school system was set up 1st through 6th, 7th through 9th, and then 10th through 12th. So there'd be elementary, middle, and high school. So a lot of kids would go to Catholic school, and then after they finished their 9th grade at the Catholic school, then they'd go to a public high school. They just didn't want to go 1 year to a junior high school. Once you got into a high school as a first-year student, well, you were with everybody else, you know. If you would come in as a third year of a junior, you'd be like an outsider, so people wouldn't do that.
In high school, did you play any high school sports or join any
I played
clubs?
football for a couple of years. Went out for track, but I wasn't any good at it, so I dropped that. And basketball, my dad wanted me to play for Pius, but I played CYO basketball just because it was with my buddies, and it was a lot more fun. And I wasn't going to be a professional basketball player anyway, so I might as well have fun at it. And a lot of good memories from basketball. And again, they took very good care of us. The parish, actually, when between 6th and 7th grade, they built a new school. And when they did that, they built a new convent, and underneath the convent, they had a locker room. And you go down there, and they had showers and everything, and anytime we wanted to use the gym, if there wasn't anybody using it, just go to the rectory, and the priest would give you the key, and you had the hall to yourself, and you'd turn the lights on, and you had showers, and we'd play basketball. I mean, we were actually quite fortunate, almost like wealthy. You know, you had your own private gym, so yeah, we were very fortunate.
In high school, did you enjoy your classes, or were there any classes that stood out?
Does everybody enjoy every class? No, I had no problem with any of the classes. I understood that they were trying to teach me. They were there to help me. So, but as far as having a favorite class or anything like that, not really. I wasn't that good at any of them, you know, to say, well, this is my favorite class because I was good at it. I had good memories from it. Mechanical drawing was fun. We had a fun teacher, and a lot of good memories there. The nuns were still had most of the teachers there were nuns. They were Franciscan nuns, and they were dedicated people, and didn't always agree with them, but I respected them tremendously. They were doing good, you know, for society and people. So, yeah, we got along.
Were there any other fun church events that they did, or like the church set them up, like the basketball or other stuff like that?
That was enough. Pretty much so the basketball thing, the other activities in the church, at CYO we'd have dances, and I did help put one on one time. I mean, I didn't play, but our CYO group was short of cash, and we had a new priest, Father Straub, and they were worried about funding the CYO activity. I says, well, we'll just have a dance. And he was kind of skeptical. But I knew a guy who had a band, and they were very popular. And asked him, he says, yeah, I'll do it for, say, $150, whatever, which was, or $100. So the priest was a little worried about that. But then we scored big because they were a good band. When we filled the CYO coffers, and that worked out well.
At Pius, did you have like rivalries with other schools, or big games like big football?
Oh
games?
yeah, it'd be the Marquette was a big one.
Would
Oh yeah.
I've heard in the past that like Pius kids and Marquette kids would go to Gillies like after games.
Oh yeah, well sure, and kids from Juneau too.
Would you ever get into any like brawls or fist fights?
No.
No, nothing
No.
like. Okay.
No, there was rumors and people would. No, nobody would want to mess with me, hey? No, we were. It was all. It was mostly in fun. There was no. In fact, one of my best friends played for Marquette. So we weren't. There was a rivalry, but there wasn't any contempt or hate or So yeah, it was a rivalry, but friendly, and we did beat them that year. Conference champs, undefeated. Football. And my good friend kicked a field goal to beat them 3-0.
3-0 was the final score of the game.
That's it.
And you were at that game? You
Oh,
were?
sure,
Yeah.
sure. I didn't play. No, I wasn't playing at the time. But yeah, I knew everybody on the team because I had played with them. Then I was still all very good friends with everybody on the team.
Are you still friends with anyone who's on the football team with you?
At this point in time, let me see, that's like 65 years ago, right? Yeah, but there's only one that I can think of that's still around, and my good friend that played for Marquette, I still see him several times a year, and we're still tight, even though he's went to Marquette.
So after Pius, where did you go to college?
Yeah, just a very short tenure at UW at Madison. It was a learning experience, fun experience. Yeah, UW Madison it had the reputation. I don't even know why they accepted me, but I didn't even want to go to college. It wasn't my ambition, but I was kind of pushed to go to college, and so I went to UW in Madison, and it didn't work out grade-wise, but met a lot of people, had a good time, made some friends, and even one friend I made was from the Bronx. So I visited him in New York. We were close enough for that. So yeah, I made some good friends there.
What were you interested in studying in college?
I really didn't have a lot of interest. My interests were lied with electrical work. So, I took electrical engineering, but I wasn't cut out to be an engineer. So that didn't work out. But I did get my apprenticeship and became an electrician, and that worked out.
How long were you at UW-Madison for?
Very short period. Just one semester.
Then you dropped out?
Yeah.
And then where did you go after you left?
Well, I bounced around a little bit and until I got an apprenticeship to be an electrician. So I did that when I was 20.
All right, so we're gonna take our 5-minute break. We'll be back soon. So, Grandpa Rodger, can you tell me a little bit more about your apprenticeship?
Yeah, it was an electrical apprenticeship, and it was to be a maintenance electrician, which was you're an industrial electrician, so it's a matter of any machinery machinery. You would troubleshoot and repair machinery. And what they were making at the time, or breaking into at the time, was numerically controlled machinery. And like I said, originally they used Mylar tape and a tape reader, and they'd read blocks of information. And each block of information would be a certain command for the machine to follow. And that hung around for just a couple of years, and then they converted to what they would call NORPACs. And a NORPAC was made by Square D. And if you've studied logic, you know what a NOR is, a NOR gate or an OR gate or anything like that. Any decision making that's done, and all the computers run it. Okay, I mean all the digital stuff is run on logic. Either it's an or not or, which would be a NOR, or an and or not and, which would be an and. So then if you would have, say you had an OR circuit, if either one of the inputs would be positive, the output, because it's an OR, would be positive. It would be the opposite with a NOR. And an AND would be just what it says. If you got A and, then you'd get an output. And you could run it negatively as an and that's what they use generally. Well, that's the general makeup of the digital end of it. The NORPAC was the next step. They would take NORs and tie all the NORs together to do logic. Okay. And then they went to what they just called DNC, which was digital numerical control. And this was just a lot of backplane wiring. So you'd open up the panel and there'd be wires from A to Z, 1 to 50, 1 to 600, whatever, all over. And they'd be doing that decision making using that logical setup. And then eventually they went to what they have now, computer numerical control. But when they came out, they weren't big. I mean, they weren't huge memory-wise. You have on your phone, you probably have, on your computer, you got not kilobytes, not megabytes, you got terabytes now. Okay? And the first time I saw a CNC machine, it had a computer and a PDP-8. And it was made by an outfit out east. And it had 8K of memory, 8 kilobytes. And I said to the instructor, I said, wow, 8 kilobytes, what are you going to do with all of that? And nowadays, everybody's got megabytes and terabytes and all that kind of stuff. So it was just minor stuff, but you could do major work with this minor stuff. And Yeah, they were a very reputable organization. I've been offered jobs just because of where I served my apprenticeship. They were that noteworthy in the industry. So I was very fortunate to get in there and learn a little bit about machinery and how to deal with it.
Sorry, where was the apprenticeship again?
It was at Kearney and Trecker. They were on Highway 100 and Theodore Trecker Drive. Today it's a who's the Quad Graphics is there now. If you go down Highway 100, just north of Greenfield Avenue, maybe 5 or 6 blocks, you'll see Quad Graphics, and that used to be Kearney and Trecker when I worked there. They originally were on National Avenue, about 68th and National, and then they moved out to Highway 100 in the 60s.
But you would say your apprenticeship did it set you up for a good like career path in the future?
Oh yes, oh yeah. I didn't have any trouble finding work or jobs, as an electrician. Like I say, there's been times I was hired on the spot, and they just look at the resume and they say Kearney and Trecker, and I said yeah, and they said when can you start? They were very reputable. Yeah, they made machine tools. The CNCs were what they specialized in, but they would make special machines too. When things got slow, they would do specials. And they could make almost anything you wanted. Say, well, I remember things were really slow, and this company came and said, well, we want to make railroad wheels. Can you make us a machine to make railroad wheels? Well, sure, we can do anything. So they made, special machines like that, just to keep the company going. Machine tool manufacturing is very cyclical. You could work 7 days a week, 1 week, and you can be laid off the next. That's kind of putting it starkly, but I mean, a machine tool was upsy downsy.
So, after your apprenticeship, where did that lead you next?
We wanted to make a family move, and we wanted to make a cultural move, and we wanted to, or at least I wanted to, back to the land, go out to the country. By then I was married, and Nancy and I had 2 children. Devin's mother being about a year old, maybe not that old, when we moved out to La Crosse area. And then I got a job out there at the Train Company. And Train makes refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. And that was one of the jobs that I got hired on the spot. The superintendent looked at my resume. He says, wait a minute. He went into his office and he called my boss in West Allis, and he came out of the office and asked me when I could start. So it was a very valuable place to serve your apprenticeship. So.
You talked about your wife Nancy. How did you meet her?
It was a blind date, basically. It wasn't even a blind date where we were set up. to go out. My brother, I told you before, was in engineering and all that. He was the president of the Triangle fraternity at Milwaukee School of Engineering. And they were having a party, and he said, hey, we need more people to come. So you want to come? I said, sure, I'm not doing anything. And the same with Nancy. She was there with a friend. My brother was dating one of Nancy's roommates. She was renting with 3 or 4 other girls on, above a shoe store on North Avenue. And she was invited to go there, so then she went to the party and I went to the party and we met there, and that was it. Well, not really, that was it. It took a while. It took a while to convince her to go out with me, but it worked out.
Now, I know that you were in the military for a little bit. Was that before or after you met Graham and Nancy?
That was before, because I was already on an apprenticeship. Yeah. I had, that's a longer story, but at the time I was in a National Guard missile unit right out on Davidson Drive, right out in Waukesha. And it was a Nike Hercules. You guys know about Nike Hercules?
Yeah, I think we're learning about it right now.
Yeah, they were, it was surface-to-air, anti-aircraft missile. They were defensive units that they had set up around Milwaukee, around every major city in the country had Nike Hercs. So I was in that unit for a while. But I was in that before that. That's, you're gonna get into a real long story here about how I got into it. And I had to, in order to get the apprenticeship, I had to satisfy a military obligation. And if I was in a reserve unit, that allowed me to get the apprenticeship. Okay, so that's why I joined that unit. And yeah, but I was in a unit before I met Grandma Nancy.
And then I also understand that you were a PO in the military. Was that before you were stationed at the...
That was after.
Oh.
I was in a reserve unit, and then I volunteered to go full-time, get out of the reserve and go active duty. And so then I went into the regular Army, and when I finished that, then came home and got married and finished the apprenticeship.
Did the military teach you any lessons or?
Oh gosh, it's I guess if you talk to most everybody that's been in the military, they'll tell you that it was a great experience, but I'll never do it again. It's one of those things. You meet a lot of people, you do a lot of things, and you have a lot of memories, but living under the UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, is not an easy thing. You know, if they say jump, you just say, how high? Yeah, I was, most of the time I was military police, so then you get involved with prisoner transfer, you get involved with regular policing, you get involved with traffic, you get involved with patrolling, little stockade work, which was interesting. Like I say, you meet a lot of different people and a lot of different attitudes, and you find out a lot about people, you know, down to their basic unit, you know. I mean, you're living close with, there's 50 guys in a barracks, there's 150 in a company, and you know everybody, and there's always different actions going on. So you learn a lot, you do a lot of different things.
How long did you serve for, roughly?
2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, I got my card. Well, that's important, because that's how we were able to purchase our property, was a VA. VA had a loan opportunity. You could borrow, the VA would be like a parent. They'd back you up with a guarantee, so you could borrow to buy a home. And yeah, that was very generous. I thought that worked out slick for us. Otherwise, well, you hear about it today, how hard it is or difficult it is for people to buy a house nowadays. And it wasn't that much easier years ago. If I didn't have VA, I don't know, weren't able to take out a loan till we were 30 years old. If I had a VA, we'd probably been 35 or 40 before we'd have enough to take out a loan. So it wasn't that much easier years ago than it is today.
Where were you looking to try and buy a house, or where did you end up living when you were at Train?
Oh, well, when we first moved out there, we rented because that's just the way it had to be, because we didn't know anything. But once I got settled in that Train, we were looking for a farmette or a hobby farm or smaller farming situation. There's no way you can afford a farm even back then. So yeah, we were able to purchase what we have now. It's 8 acres out just north of La Crosse.
And then you came back to Milwaukee, did you?
Yes, it was, I don't want to say a bit off more than we can chew, but it was pretty difficult making it on the wages that I was making at Train, and got offered a nice opportunity in Milwaukee. So we took that, moved back to Milwaukee, and made good money and saved the money, and then went back to La Crosse or Holman and used that money to remodel the house, make the house livable. It was an old farmhouse when we moved in, and it was difficult. And when we moved back, we had to do a lot of work. Well, I had to do a lot of work.
When you moved back to Milwaukee, where in the city were you living?
We lived on the northwest side. It's just off of Mill Road on 71st. Yeah, it was just, we could have moved anywhere, but I wanted the kids to live in Milwaukee and let them see what living in the city was like, you know.
What was living in Milwaukee life at the time? Like, what was it like?
I don't, we didn't have any difficulties as far as living in Milwaukee. We had good neighbors. I mean, we just got along with the neighbors, and my wife Nancy was a Girl Scout troop leader, so that brought a lot more people into our kids' lives. Our daughters had a lot of friends who not only lived in the neighborhood but were part of the group. So, yeah, they got to learn a little bit about Milwaukee, and they went to Milwaukee Public Schools. And Milwaukee Public Schools, it was an education in itself. The kids, I wanted the kids to learn about growing up in the real world. I didn't want them living in a isolated situation where everybody's like me. You know, where I grew up, West Allis had more people living in it when I was growing up than live there today. But the ethnicities weren't there. I mean, like I say, we had a lot of Eastern Europeans and that, but we didn't have any, there was no Hispanics, or there weren't any Hispanics, there weren't any blacks, there weren't any, okay? So I wanted the kids to grow up in Milwaukee so they could bump shoulders with everybody and not live in a fairly segregated situation. Because when I grew up in West Allis, I don't think there's more than one black person living in West Allis. And if you saw black people, they were getting on the streetcar or the bus to go home, or they're coming to work, you know, but they weren't living there. So, again, this is, when I grew up, it was the 50s, and then when we came back, it was late 70s, early 80s, and things were changing, and I wanted the kids to be part of that. So that's why we moved to Milwaukee and not, you know, South Milwaukee or even, you know, Brookfield. Well, I couldn't afford Brookfield, so it could have been West Allis, but it hadn't changed that much by then.
So, from the neighborhood was pretty diversified in your.
Yes, yes, I would say it was very, very diversified, and our neighbors were Jewish, they were black, they were, you name it, they were all there. So that, I thought that was a big positive for the kids, because they know how to deal with people, just people, you know, rather than one group of people. They could deal with anybody.
Were there any issues with the neighborhood, or was everything?
I'd never had any issues, and there weren't you know, any gang type things or any of that, you know. So there weren't any real negative issues. No.
You mentioned your kids. Like, can you? I guess we didn't go over this yet, but can you name like the names of your kids and what years they were born, stuff like that?
So Chris was the first, and she was born January 8th, 1972. And your mom was born January 26th.
Melissa, yeah. I get, yeah.
And
Melissa.
in 73. And then Dawn was born November 21st in 75. And those are the only 3 children we had. And then fortunately, all our children were healthy and never caused us any issues, or we had any problems. You know, there's a lot of people that have, unfortunately, you know, some kids have either are born with either mental or physical disabilities, and we've always been lucky that we never had to deal with that. And they're healthy, you know.
Can you speak on Grandma Nancy's like behalf? What if she was like a stay-at-home mom, or if she had a job, or where she worked, stuff, and what she did?
Was the deal we made the night I proposed to her. I says, "Well, look, we're never going to be rich," so I held true to that. And I said I preferred that she would stay home with the kids. And she did for about 18 years. And then I think once and Chris was like 18, she was a senior in high school, then Grandma Nancy took a job in the cafeteria at school, and which worked out okay because if the kids were in school, well, she'd be working there. If the kids weren't in school, she wouldn't be working. So she never, the kids always had someone at home. And I always thought that was important. It's the way I grew up, the way most people grew up in my generation. So, yeah, I didn't want to leave that.
So in this stint in Milwaukee, where did you work?
Oh, I worked at A.O. Smith, and then after A.O. Smith, I took a job with, I wasn't real crazy about the work they assigned me at A.O. Smith, so I took a job with E-Line Electric, and E-Line was a construction company, and worked on remodeling out at Brookfield Square and other remodeling jobs. And then seeing that's what they call outside electrician, that's with the IBEW local, construction local. I got laid off because I wasn't in the local union. You have to have like a year, a couple thousand hours before you can apply to join the union. So I got laid off, but then I got a job at AC Spark Plug in Oak Creek. And it was General Motors, and that was a good job, a well-paying job. Benefits were good, the job paid well. But then the economy changed, and fortunately for me, instead of being laid off, because this was in the early 80s, if you got laid off from General Motors, you were out of work for a couple of years. And I was fortunate enough, I left just before that happened and got a job at Pabst, and that was the best job I ever had. It was casual. I mean, it was, General Motors was, they had like cops on a job. I mean, they had guys that would watch you. They were kind of strange that way. But Pabst was real laid back. It was, you punch in, you go change. You do your job, nobody bothered you. And it was a steady work, good pay, and a lot of characters. So it was just a fun place to work.
Was PAPS different from some of those electrical jobs or some of the other jobs you have? Was the work different, or what were you doing the same?
You're still doing electrical work, but in a different phase. It wasn't the most sophisticated work. One of the reasons I got hired there is I had experience with PLCs, which are programmable logic controllers, which is a industrial computer kind of a deal, where you could run your programs into the PLC, and it's a computer, and then you'd get your real world or your electrical outputs to control things. So because I had experience in that, I got hired there, and it was just an excellent job. The technology wasn't the most advanced that I had worked with, but the working situation was very good, very good.
So, Pabst being a brewery, did you ever get like rewarded with like beer or anything like on the job, like anything like that? Any like beer parties?
Of course. Oh no, yeah, beer parties. You know, they had beer. I used to bike to work a lot. And it was nice in the summertime. You get off the bike, and I mean, it's like 8 or 10 mile bike ride. You get down there, you're a little warm, you're a little thirsty. You punch in, you go into the locker room, and they had beer on tap. So you just have a couple of beers and change your clothes and go to work.
Seems safe.
Pardon me?
Seems very safe to operate heavy machinery while after drinking beer. Were there any accidents that occurred, or was it fun working?
Oh no! They watched that. No, you'd have a couple beers, but the guys would control it.
So at Pabst, what were the different things on like the site, like buildings?
Oh, on the brew side, we had the malt house, the brew house, the keg house, filter cellars, aging, things like that.
And then those, like if all those together would eventually lead to the final product of.
Right. That's right. Once it goes through filter cellars and they say it's beer, then it's beer. Then it goes through the metering system so they can tax it.
You mentioned how you would bike to work. So did you have any cars? Did you own a car, or did you?
Oh yeah, we had a car. At the time, I believe we had a Dodge van. But when the weather was nice, I'd ride almost all the time. But when the weather was nice, I'd definitely ride. And then we had the one vehicle, and then my wife would take the kids places. I worked a lot of second shift, some third shift, but I worked a lot of second shift. And that gave them the opportunity to get out, do things. So that all worked out. I didn't want two vehicles, too much stuff to mess with.
So what did you like about biking, or why did you choose to?
It was good exercise, and you get the blood flowing, and you feel good. Even today, after a bike ride, I feel a lot better than when I started the bike ride. So that's why I do it.
Did you do it as a kid at all, or did you pick it up?
Not as much as a kid. I had a bike because I had a paper route, and most kids in the neighborhood had bikes. And so I'd ride the bike there, and like I say, I went to the school was only, say, 3 blocks away from the house. So we had, at lunchtime, get on the bike. I could be home in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, have lunch, and bike back to school, and which was nice. You know, we didn't have any kids brought their own lunch back then. There was no such thing as hot lunch. So not until I think I was like in 8th grade, they might have started a hot lunch program, but I never participated.
You said you had a paper route. Can you talk more about your experience as a paper boy?
Yeah, that was also a lot of fun. It was a buddies thing, and my paper route was from 76th and Greenfield on the west side of 76th down to Pierce, which was the Milwaukee border, Milwaukee West Allis border. So it's right stone's throw from the fair park. And back then, I had a journal route, and there were 63 houses, and I had 62 customers. So almost everybody took the paper. I think there was one person that didn't take the paper. I don't know why, but everybody.
So now getting back to your time at Pabst, did you like the people you worked with?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of characters there, and they were, they talk about anything, they do any, you know, they were very, a lot of interesting people. I didn't know these people, I worked with them, but I mean, Mr. Milwaukee was one of the employees there, and tough man contest. Before they have this ultimate fighting that they have now, they used to have Budweiser ran a tough man contest, and they'd go to all the major cities and they'd say, get in the ring, see who the toughest guy in this block is or this town is. And the guy at Pabst, Jeff May, he was a tough guy. He went to nationals, and he could have won it, but he got disqualified because after he won the fight, and they said that's it, he kept fighting. He was, he didn't like the guy, and so they disqualified him, and he took 3rd place in nationals. So those kind of guys. His dad was really, I used to talk to his dad a lot. Jeff Bay Sr.
Were there any like famous people now that you worked with, like at Pabst?
Well, one guy, Randy Sprecher was a brew house foreman on 2nd shift, and I was his electrician. So if he had anything going wrong there, he'd give me a call. And one time I was breaking in on a new electrician, and he offered us a beer, and it was a real dark beer. And he said, try this, I'm making this at home, and see if it's any good. And we tried it, and we thought it was really good. We told him, Randy, you ought to make this. So when Pabst ran into trouble, they became a victim of a leverage buyout, and they had to cut back on their staff, and he was one of the first people they let go. Randy was. And the reason, I have no idea why they did that, but legend has it that when you're supervision at Pabst, you just don't fill out a form where you worked, how old you were, what you did. They ask you a question like, well, what are your goals in life, or what would you like to accomplish? And Randy said someday he'd like to have his own brewery. And so when they called him in the office and they said, Randy, this is legend, I don't know if it's true, but they said, Randy, we're going to give you the opportunity to realize your life's dream. And they let him go. And that's when he started his brewery. And I saw him at his brewery when he was first trying to get into the brewing, and he was working up all his formulas. He lost probably 30 or 40 pounds. He was working so hard. It was incredible. But he stuck with it, and it worked out well, obviously.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. It sounds like you had one of the first Sprecher beers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Yeah, me and Kenny, the electrician I worked with, yeah. But we had plenty of beer around, and there was no such thing at that time as microbreweries. He was the first one in the States, so I mean, it was just a new thing, and people didn't know. You're taking a chance. You don't know if it's going to work or not. And he threw everything into it, and I'm glad it worked out for him. He earned it.
So how long did you work at Pabst?
A little over 5 years. Enough to get a pension, which is good. Yeah, I would have stayed longer, but I wanted, by that point in time when I left there, we had a big enough nest egg where we could go back to Holman and deal with the farm. So that worked out well.
So what year did you move back out to the La Crosse area?
85.
85.
85, yeah.
And then what was your employment in La Crosse?
Well, my employment I didn't actually look for a job until the end of 85 or early 86, because in the meantime I was remodeling the house. The money we saved, we used that to buy time and material to redo the house. So we tore off the old kitchen bathroom and all that, and put up a new one, and then redid the roof and gutted the interior, and so I was first job I got was in Holman. When we got back was for a heating and air conditioning contractor, which worked out to my advantage because I was able to buy a heating system through him at cost, which saved us a lot of money, and I had gained the experience working for him to install the equipment. So I was able to install a heating system, obviously the electrical system and all that kind of stuff. So did all the carpentry work. So yeah, that was a life experience.
Were there any other reasons why you moved back, why you left Milwaukee to go back to La Crosse, or was it just because you had...
No, it was just to continue with the dream of the farm, the area, and it worked out well. I'm happy with it. You know, we have some acreage out in the country, and our eastern and northern border is all nature conservancy, so we don't, it sort of expands our 8 acres, because there's a couple hundred acres of conservancy that borders our property, so it's, that's how we won the lottery, is what I tell people, when they, because that was all farmland. And the Mississippi Valley Conservancy purchased that property, and now it's conservancy, and it works out well for us. It gives us a lot of privacy. The conservancy is closed April, May, June, July. It was put in place because they wanted a bird sanctuary, basically, so they don't want anybody back there disturbing the creatures. So it's quite nice.
You talk about being in a lot of privacy in La Crosse. Did you enjoy being more in, like, around other people in like a city feel when you were in Milwaukee, or did you always?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of good friends, and from over the years. I mean, I've got friends who, known these guys for 70 years, no, 65 years, and we still get together. And yeah, and they're good enough friends that they're friends with my wife too. You know, I mean, we all get along. They're a good group of people, so yeah, we weren't hurting for company or friends. We did well there.
And when you say you had a farm in La Crosse, or in Holman, sorry, did you have like chickens or horses or anything like that?
Yeah, when we first moved up there, we had 5 head of beef. That came with the property, a separate purchase, but that came with the property. And then, and then we raised chickens. We raised some Babcocks for layers. And we had a dozen of those, and in the summertime we'd get anywhere from, we'd get about a dozen eggs a day. They would lay every day. And we also raised what they call heavies, and they were roasting chickens, and we had 50 of those. But the only problem with those is we had them all they were all the same age, so they had to be butchered pretty much the same time. So I had to butcher 50 chickens by myself, and you don't want to do that. It's a lot of work.
Did you have any like pets or any?
Oh yeah,
animals?
we had, when we lived in Milwaukee, the kids wanted pets, but we said no, not when we're renting. We didn't want that. It says, when you go out to the farm, you can have whatever you want. So then Auntie Chris got a cat. Your mom got a dog, Sandy, and Auntie Dawn got a cat, Carmel. And the kids were good with the pet, and the pets were good. Everybody in the neighborhood knew who our pets were. The kids would, because the dogs would run. And the pets themselves got along, because when the kids would come home on the bus, for some reason, the cats and the dog would sit in the driveway, and they knew the kids were coming on the bus, and they knew what time the bus was coming, and the cats and the dog would go out there and wait for the kids. Kids get off the bus, and the pets would be waiting for them. So yeah, that was cool. And then we were there, I don't know, maybe a year or so, maybe a little less. And a friend of mine came over, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years because we were in Milwaukee, and he came over and he says, I was wondering if you're still up here. And I said, yeah. I said, I just came back by coincidentally. And he says, yeah, he says, I was wondering. He says, I got some horses and I wonder if we could keep the horses up here. So at the time we didn't have any other animals. And I said, well, sure, if my kids could, use the horses too. So yeah, we put up 5 horses we had. And the kids, they enjoyed it. I mean, having the horses, and we had plenty of area to run the horses in, so that wasn't the problem. They enjoyed the horses. Kind of, they felt kind of rich. I mean, a lot of kids want horses, right? Oh, if I could only have a horse. So we had 5 of them. So they got to ride the horses anytime they wanted and that kind of stuff. So give them a little responsibility too. They would help take care of the horses.
I found it interesting how you've lived parts of your life in a farm, more like enclosed area, and then other parts of your life you lived in like a major American city like Milwaukee. So not to put you on the spot here, but do you have a preference, or do they each have their own?
I think it was a matter of age. When I was younger, I wanted to be in the city, and when I first got out of the military and finishing up my apprenticeship, a lot of my friends were in the same boat, getting out of the military and this and that. And we were tight, and I enjoyed all of that. I mean, we needed, I don't say we needed, but we enjoyed one another's company. We always got together. But then after a while, you get a little bit older, and you have a family, and you're, well, then the family comes first. So you do what you want to do with the family. But yeah, it wasn't easy leaving the friends. They came out to our place quite a bit too. So I mean, they enjoyed coming out to the country. So they eventually all split up anyways. One of my good friends ended up in Denmark, one ended up in Colorado, so they moved all over too.
Well, that's all we really have for you, questions-wise. If you have any other stories or memories you want to bring up for the last...
Well, maybe I could just quickly tell you the story you asked about the lucky nickel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that interesting.
So, my buddy's father was a county supervisor. He was chairman of the Parks Commission in Milwaukee County. So he was instrumental in bringing the Braves to Milwaukee. Consequently, they had seats right in back of the first base dugout. I mean, they'd put their soda or whatever right on the top of the dugout. They were in the first row. So they got to talk to the ball players, and one of them, one of the favorites was Joe Adcock. Everybody liked Joe Adcock. Joltin' Joe. Boy, buddy, the Braves are going to New York. They're going to be playing a series with the Giants. They're starting out with the Giants at the Polo Grounds, which don't exist anymore. And he says, Joe, he says, I want you to take my lucky nickel with you when you go to New York. So Joe says, thanks a lot, kid, they go back and forth. Well, they go to New York, and Joe hits 4 home runs and a double in one game, 18 bases, and everybody thinks that's never going to be broken. It might be broken by now, but 18 bases. So my buddy says, that's my lucky nickel that did it. Next day, Joe's at the plate and Ruben Gomez beans him. And that started a big royal fight between the Giants and the Braves that went on. When they came back to Milwaukee, when the Giants came back to Milwaukee, it looked like blood was going to be spilled. Because Ruben did a little chin music for Joe, and Joe grabbed the bat and went after him with the bat. So, I don't know if it was my buddy says, I don't know if it was a lucky nickel or not, but it happened.
Yeah.
18 bases.
Yeah.
4 home runs in one game. And this is at the Polo Grounds.
Was that where the outfield goes back farther? Or?
Yeah, it was like 500-600 feet. You hit it dead center. You're not going to hit a home run. Very few people could do that. But Joe had 4 home runs and a double.
Yeah, that's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Maybe you lost the nickel after that game with 18 bases, and then that's why you got it.
You should have saved the nickel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any other stories that you think would be relevant, or did we pretty much get the gist of it?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I could go into personal stories, but that's not,
So, how do you spend your time after retirement, like these days, right about now?
Well, those 8 acres can be a blessing and they can be pain. So, yeah, I spend a lot of hours taking care of the 8 acres, but I'm thankful for that I can still get out there and do it. You're out in the fresh air and you're doing physical labor. It's okay.
Yeah. And I'd go on bike rides with you all the time, so just seeing that you're still active and still doing what you
You'll
want.
see things on the bike riding too. Because when I would ride from La Crosse here, go through Amish country, get off the bike trail. Once you get to Reedsburg, there's no bike trail. So you have to find a way to get from Reedsburg out to the Military Ridge Trail. So that was, you take back roads, and I remember the Amish, the kids. They see a guy on a bike and they all run up to the fence. They all want to say hi.
It's like seeing a spaceship or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, they were cute.
That's cool. Well, thank you for your time.
Oh,
It's been
you're
an honor
welcome.
Documenting
You're
your
welcome.
history.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, you're
Thank you.
welcome. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So where are we going for dinner?